Welcome to the guide for EverQuest as it was for launch, aka Vanilla or Classic EQ. This is everything you need to know to succeed. There'll be timestamps so you can skip around the video as needed. Now, some basic information. For Vanilla EQ, the level cap is 50, and once there, all there's left to do is raid. The fastest and best way to max level is in a group while you use the 3 continents that are available, Otis, Antonica, and Fadewar. Classic EQ is the easiest to pick up for new players. Most classes will only do maybe 1 to 4 button presses in a fight that takes like a minute or 2. Very simple game once you understand the mechanics. Chapter 1. What you need to know about making a character. Most MMOs are based on a Trinity class design, meaning tank, heals, and DPS. EverQuest is different because it also has a 4th role, being crowd control / support. At launch, there are 14 classes and 12 races to choose from. Now, I have a video dedicated to going into each class at depth that will be linked in the comments and description, but let's briefly overview it here for the impatient. If you want to get started, this is all you need to know. So first, the tanks. Warrior is a pure melee class that uses all weapons and all armor. If you want to be the raid tank, this is the only real choice. Otherwise, other tanks hold aggro easier and function with less gear. One thing to know, though, is that Warrior is rough to play in Classic because they struggle to hold aggro well and they don't get their defining raid tank ability until the next expansion in Kunark. Paladin is a cleric, a healer, warrior hybrid. They wear plate and they use 2-handers or sword and board. They use stuns to hold aggro, and they are the only other class in the game beyond cleric that can resurrect players. So when you die in this game, you're sent back to your bind point wherever that may be. It could be across the entire world. And more importantly, you'll lose experience. A resurrect spell from a paladin or cleric can quickly bring you back to your body and recover experience lost. Experience that might have taken you half an hour to an hour to earn. That's how much you can lose. Shadow Knight is a necromancer warrior hybrid. They also wear plate, and they use 2-handers or sword and board. They use damage over time effects, aka dots, to hold aggro. They can steal health with life taps, and they have the ability to drop aggro with a feign death spell. They are often considered to be the best group tank for the entire game. The devs really love this class. Now, the last tank, Ranger, is a warrior druid hybrid. They're squishier than all the other ones because they wear chain, but they can use all weapons. They use snares and dots to hold aggro very easily, probably the easiest out of all the tanks, to be honest. They are the only tank with a run speed buff. That's a plus, but otherwise they don't really have a niche. They don't come into their own until several expansions later, where they turn more into a DPS first and emergency off-tank second. They function fine as a tank for early eras though, but it completely goes away later on in the game. Now for the healers. Cleric is the purest healer in game. They're the beefiest because they wear plate armor, and they have the most powerful and efficient heals in the game. They also have the best res in game. Clerics are required to raid. That's all you really need to know. Druid is one of the most versatile classes in game, good soloing and grouping. Now they're squishier because they wear leather, and they're the only other class beyond Wizard that has fast travel for the group. They can teleport you around. Not the best heals, not the best damage, not the best buffs, but they do all in a pinch. Shaman is a support healer hybrid. They wear chain. They've got strong buffs that also stack with a cleric's, so the peak hit points you can possibly get is having both cleric and shaman buffs. Druid buffs don't stack. They can make melee DPS attack faster, make mobs attack slower, meaning they put out less damage, and they can trade their own health directly for mana. They're needed on raids for their powerful support buffs and debuffs, especially the slow. Thirdly, the caster DPS classes who all wear cloth. So Wizard is just two facets. They have the hardest nukes in the game, and they're the other class beyond Druid that can teleport players. Now they differ from Druids because they have exclusive ports to the planar raid zones, being Plane of Sky and Plane of Hate. Only they can do that, but it only matters this expansion. Their niche is that they do the most burst damage, but they run out of mana very fast. Magicians have similar nukes to the Wizard, but weaker. Throw that in with the strongest pets in the game. They can also summon items like food, drink, and other gadgets. Their niche is that they have good sustain because of the pet damage, and they have the ability to burst because of their nukes, but they're not the best at either sustain or burst damage. Necromancer is the class you want to pick if you like soloing. They use dots to slowly but efficiently dispatch foes, while their weak pet throws in some help. They have great sustain because of their Lich buff that slowly drains health for mana, the smallest potential downtime of any class. They can also drop aggro with Feign Death, very safe soloers. They are the best in long fights because of their sustain, but they struggle to compete in short fights unless it's undead, because they struggle to put damage out quickly. Next are the melee DPS classes. Monk is a pure martial artist. They use leather armor and then just their fists or blunt weapons. They are often considered to be the best DPS class for basically the entire game for how consistently they top the parses. They need nothing out of the box to wreck mobs, just their fists. They excel at sustained damage with no downtime. Monks have the only Feign Death that costs nothing to use. It's just a cooldown timer, and it makes them the default raid puller for most situations. Rogue is a chain-wearing thief that uses daggers to backstab. They are one of two classes that can open up locked doors, but they don't get any really good weapons until the next expansion, so they struggle to keep parity with the other DPS classes. And lastly, that fourth role that EQ has beyond the Trinity, the crowd controllers. So what the heck is it? Mobs in EQ are really tough. Any group can handle, say, one at a time, but you put in 2-3 more mobs in the fray, and it's often a wipe. So some classes specialize at handling the extras, perma-stunning them with an ability called Mez. Enchanter is a spellcaster that wears cloth. They have the best mana regen buff in the game, and they are the only ones that can AoE Mez at this point, meaning they can lock down nightmare pulls like groups of 5 to 10 mobs with just a single spell cast. They can slow mobs' attack speed down, boost group melee attack speed up at the same time, and they are the meta DPS class for the first few expansions because they can temporarily take control of most mobs as a pet to do their bidding. Charming. Charm pets do better damage than any player, and they are beefier tanks than any tank in the first few expansions. But it's very risky. If that charm breaks, enchanters are very squishy. The last class is Bard, my personal favorite. Bard is the ultimate jack of all trades. So they can do a little of most classes, but they're not the best in many cases. They wear plate armor, so they're pretty sturdy, and they use most single-handed weapons. They have the fastest run speed buff in the game. They can snare, slow enemies, help group members attack faster, help the group regen health and mana faster, mez extra mobs in camp, boost resists, and more. They can unlock doors like rogues and make for great pullers. And on top of it all, they're very unique in that they don't need any mana to cast any of their abilities, any of their spells. No downtime whatsoever. There's a catch, though, that they can only do 4 things at a time. So they're the most busy and complicated class in the game, and they can't do it all at the same time. If you're still watching this far, thank you so much for being a real fan. So those are the classes, but there's also 12 races to pick from too. Only a few things you got to know. So classes are restricted to certain races, so you can't be whatever combo you want. Some races are good alliance and others are evil, meaning you will be kill on sight if you go into the wrong area or city. If you want the easiest time to get around, just pick good alliance. But after 2-3 expansions, this faction thing doesn't matter anymore. The best racial bonuses in Classic are Ogre with frontal stun immunity. This is really great if you're any class that casts spells, like Shadow Knight as a tank, you need to cast spells for aggro, or Shaman if you're healing, because healers grab a lot of aggro. This stops it so you won't get interrupted if you get hit from the front. The other best racial is Troll with quicker health regen. And lastly, you also have to consider what deity you want your character to believe in as well. The safest bet is just go agnostic if you can, so faction is less of an issue, but deity is largely irrelevant outside of some niche items and quests. I wouldn't worry about it.
Chapter 2. What quests you should do. There were go-to quests that rewarded great experience as you leveled early on, but have long since had their experience returns nerfed into the ground on official servers. But for posterity, and still great experience on emulated servers, here they are. The earliest levels used to be powered through using bone chips off of level 1 skeletons in newbie yards. Many cities had NPCs who will take them and reward some experience with money. These taper off around levels 4 to 5. And then people would go for crush bone belts. They drop off most orcs in the popular low-level dungeon of Crushbone. You can then turn them in at the Caledon Warriors Guild for decent experience from 5 to the low teens. They also reward easy to obtain leather armor for small races. There are many others, so most of these quests have had their experience nerfed hard, but some of them are still worth doing if you need to fix up faction for a city or epic quests. Beyond those, there is one quest that is worth doing for everyone. The Journeyman's Boots quest allows all classes to have an instant cast run speed buff with infinite charges. Great for anyone who needs a junk buff for raiding or any class without a run speed buff. Getting one of the items can be challenging though, with how much competition there is.
Generally speaking, if you're going to solo, you want to stick to outdoor zones because they're the easiest to run away in and give the best visibility. Otherwise, the fastest experience will always come in groups. The most pug groups will usually be in your newbie yard to about 4 to 5, then crush bone until low teens, unrest until late 20s/early 30s, lower guck to mid 40s, and then Nagafin's lair to the hole or to 50. EverQuest has a lot of options though. If you don't like how crowded one area is, or you want a change of scenery, there are many other places to go. Just a simple Google search of EverQuest leveling guides will give you alternatives to choose from. But one thing you need to know is how EverQuest handles overcrowding. So each of these zones only have enough mobs to go around for so many people. So to combat overcrowding, most zones will open a fresh pick or an empty clone when a certain player threshold is reached. Like say, 30 people in Unrest will spawn another empty clone of Unrest for people to move into. You can swap by typing /pick. It'll also show how populated each clone is.
All right, Chapter 4, How to Get Geared. Entry-level gear, you're going to be strapped for cash starting out. You can usually get cloth armor cheap off of vendors, and it also drops off with the level 1 skeletons in the newbie yard. If you can wear it, leather and raw hide is not much more expensive, and that's sold off of vendors too. It's not commonly dropped though, you'll have to buy it. Now, if you're a small ace or you're like one of the elves, this is where you're in luck. It's really easy to get leather off of the Crushbone Belts quests and or the vendors nearby that people sell all those items to. It's very cheap if people have been offloading their inventories. But if you're not a class that wears chain or plate, this is as far as you need to go until raid gear at max level. You can get by with cloth gear. Now, what if you are a class that wears chain or plate and you got a little money to twink with? This is the best entry level gear. Bandit armor. So this is chain armor that's crafted. It will serve tanks good enough to 50, but it takes a while for a crafter on a new server to get the skill needed to make this. Just so you don't get ripped off, if you're looking to buy banded, it's usually sold for 1 plat per armor class. Now for intermediate chain and plate armor sets, There are these specific class quests coming out of the Temple of Soul Row for everybody except like Warrior and Shaman, where it's somewhere else. They do have the quest too. This armor looks really cool when it's complete. It's all color coordinated and it has stat boosts, which is unusual this early in the game. You can get all the pieces without touching any raid content too, but it can get pricey because many of these gear pieces require gemstones to make and that are very expensive, and some of the camps for quest drops are terrible. I don't think they're worth the effort to do unless you've stumbled across most of the needed quest drops by grouping. Maybe you're one item off of completing a piece, then you might as well finish it. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. Lastly, the raid tier. This is the planar armor sets coming from Plane of Fear and Plane of Hate, the two main raid zones of this expansion. Specific trash mobs will drop gear for each class, like Banshees and Plane of Hate drop Bard gear. Unfortunately, the devs didn't have itemization figured out this early in the game, so the stats are wonky. They're kind of all over the place and not optimal, but it's still great gear for what it is. And even when you replace it, don't destroy it, because in the Planes of Power expansion later on, you can get gemstones for turning these things into a guild master. So what I do, I usually try to get cloth/leather gear first. I'll buy banded or make it myself when it's available. You should have the money by the time you're max level to at least get banded. And then I just hold out for raid armor drops. That's the laziest way to get geared. Beyond that, there's one item every class will want to get. It'll drop for a limited time though. Guise the Deceiver from the Ghoul Assassin in Lower Guk. So it's a Dark Elf illusion item that every class can use. Now later on, this mask gets nerfed so that only bards and rogues can use it. So get it before it gets nerfed. You usually have a few weeks. Chapter 5, Where to Buy and Sell Stuff. In early EverQuest, there is no dedicated auction house window, or zone for that matter. So most people will congregate in the Common Lands tunnel and they'll use the auction channel to type out and post their wares there. The game forces you this early on to talk to people if you want to buy or sell valuable stuff. One thing you should know too is in that same area, there's a parcel NPC, a parcel merchant that you can sell stuff to, and you can also use it to mail items to say your alts or other people. Chapter 6, What you need to know about raiding. You can start at level 46 as that's the minimum requirement to enter most of these raid zones, but I would wait until you're max level 50 to really start. If you de-level to 45 by dying, you won't be able to get back in some of these zones. Now there is a pay-to-win perk you can add on to your membership as you purchase the membership. And what it does is it makes it so you won't de-level when you die. I think it's best bought in Classic when you have to do those raids where a lot of them have death touchers, they'll just insta-kill you. And rezzing is pretty limited before the Cleric Epic is a thing. Now, if you're interested in raiding and you are the right level, I would recommend to check out the EverQuest forums, specifically the TLP Guild Recruitment tab. Find a guild that raids at a good time for you. Raids are instanced in this game, and all the guilds will pick a scheduled time to do that every week. And the only thing is you'll likely need to install Discord, as most guilds use it for voice chat during raids. Early on, raids are capped at 72 players per zone, so it really doesn't matter if you picked a suboptimal class. Like you picked Rogue, don't worry about it. There's probably room for you somewhere. Pick whatever class you like the most, and then just follow your raid leader's instructions. You'll do all right. Raids in early EverQuest are very simple. It's basically just tank and spank with a few AoEs. So if you have a pulse and you can follow simple instructions, you'll do fine raiding EverQuest. Don't be intimidated. There's only 2 raid zones that are locked to some degree. The Plane of Sky requires you kill trash mobs on each island to get a key to click up to the next island. You earn it as you go, so you don't have to do anything special to get it. And the second zone is a borderline raid zone. The hole off of Payneal won't open up until someone has killed Vox, Nagafin, and Finnegal on a new server. Beyond the hole in Plane of Sky, there's no special keys or special access stuff you gotta do or worry about in Classic. So I hope that's enough to get you rolling. I wish you best of luck in the world of Norath. And I want to give special thanks to our guests, Variety Void and Daemodeus, for helping out here. I'm going to give a link for, well, Daemodeus didn't have a link for his stuff, but I'll give one for Variety Void. He streams on Twitch. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.